Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Friday, May 29th, 2026 at 2:20 in the afternoon. We're here to look at Senate proposal of amendment on H211. We have our legislative counsel with us, Rick Stagel. Rick, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Rick Sagel with the Office of Legislative Counsel. So H211 flew across the Senate yesterday to quite the ride, and I was there the whole time. So
Apparently you hung on tight to here today.
it flew around. So the Senate Economic Development Committee had a few amendments. They didn't do a strike all. There's no strike all. So when I show it to you, I'm going to have to refer to the instance and then the underlying bill that you all passed back in March of 2026. Senate Finance did not amend it. Senate Appropriations had a couple of minor amendments, which we'll talk about as well. And then it passed the Senate at, I think, 6 or so last night. So let me share my screen. There are some fairly substantive amendments, some that are not as substantive. I will clarify as best I can the extent of each one. Okay, so this is the Senate proposal of amendment. It is 8 pages. There are 12 instances of amendment. The first one is substantive. The first one is a change of the definition. Maybe you all have heard of this definition. It is publicly available information, that definition. So just to put some framework around this, this is the data broker chapter, but also chapter 62, which has several types of regulations. It has the Security Breach Notice Act, that if you pass this, the Data Broker Security Breach Act. So currently that chapter, Kids Code as well. However, currently this chapter does not have a definition of publicly available information. You all passed a definition that matched Kids Code. That was the House proposal. The Senate kept what it is. I will go back and show you. That's not what I want. This. So this is the as passed by the House version. Okay, so definition 16A, chapter 62, publicly available information means information that is made available through federal, state, or local government records, or to the general public from widely distributed media, or a data broker has a reasonable basis to believe that the consumer has lawfully made available to the general public. So that part has not been amended. That part stays the same in the House proposal. The Senate proposal. The Senate proposal strikes out B, which you have basically matching the Kids Code definition of PAI. It does not match 71, which passed earlier in the Senate, because you made that one, the information for sale. If the consumer wants access to it, if they want a copy of it, but not to delete it, right? Remember that? Okay. So what the Senate did is take, and this was one of the options you had for 71, was to take those 4 kind of as controversial elements of what PAI is not. That is what has made it into the Senate proposal. So publicly available information does not include biometric data, any obscene visual depiction, genetic data, or intimate images. So kind of granted, what we're looking at here, this does not affect Kids Code. Kids Code has their own definition of this. What this affects is the rest of 62, which is mostly just data brokers. That's what this is affecting. So you may want to know, how does this affect the data broker regulations? Remember, data brokers under current law just have to register with the state and pay a $100 fee, right? This bill increases the fee to $900, adds some penalties if they don't register or if they file incorrect information. The House version had a deletion authority, which was removed. I'll get to that here in a second, by the Senate. So really what this definition is doing is changing what brokered personal information is. Brokered personal information is very similar to personal data. You can think of it as pretty similar, okay? So there are some, I've heard discussions that this changes what a data broker is. That is not correct. Okay, the Senate version has not changed the definition of data broker. It has not changed the definition of brokered personal information. What it does affect, and let me know if I'm losing you all here, is the definition of brokered personal information, which was not affected by the Senate version, says, let me go up to it. So this is what it is not. It is not publicly available information. That's kind of the crux of this, right? And that's the same thing with personal data, right? Remember, personal data does not include publicly available information in 71, right? So it's the same thing that occasionally, if a data broker has brokered personal information that is publicly available, well, that's not brokered personal information, right? But because there's no deletion authority in this bill, it's not as critical to the data broker as it would have been if that was in the bill, if that makes sense. I see some confused faces. I'm trying my best to explain the effect of this definition. It matters a lot more if you have a deletion authority, which you do not have. The Senate removed that.
They removed the what?
The deletion authority. So I'll get to that in a second, but the consumer under the House version had the right to ask for their data broker data to be deleted. That was struck by the Senate. So at this point, the bill is now changing the definitions of many things, including data brokers, including brokered personal information. And that was not changed by the Senate. Just the definition of publicly available information was amended. Let me continue. Okay. The second and third instance were grammatical, technical. I don't want to spend time. The words were not in the right order. So correcting that, no substance changes to the second or the third. Again, I think the letter V was missing in one of these. It was easier just to replace the entire subdivision. Okay, the fourth instance of amendments is reflecting the fact that the Senate removed the deletion authority. So there was a portion of the bill that referred to that deletion authority because subsection C is being struck. Instead, it is if the data broker permits deletion. So what this language is referring to, when the data broker registers with the state, they have to supply a bunch of information, right, that the House added. The Senate didn't change that. They still have to provide, I'll show you, they still have to give you quite a bit of information. Okay. So this is subchapter 5. This is the data broker subchapter. This is the House version. So they still have to do the fee, the bond, and then when they submit all this information, right? Whether they collect precise geolocation, reproductive health care data, all of these kind of sensitive data pieces, they have to let you know that they collect that. So one of those was subdivision I, a URL on the page of the data broker's website that allows consumer to delete their data. Well, that was removed, right? So instead, the language is if the data broker permits deletion. Some of them do. You can go to a data broker website today. Some of them will let you delete your data, even without the authority in Vermont. Some just do that because they're required in California or some other state. That's the fourth instance, yes.
Where do you, I'm trying to find it in the original House.
So it is on page 32, lines 10 and 11 of the as passed by the House. You're looking at the calendar?
No,
Okay.
I tried to think. I went back to the March journal. So
Okay.
Oh, I got it.
Found it. So this here has been replaced by if the data broker permits deletion. Okay, the fifth instance is deleting that subsection C, which is the deletion of authority, which was a large portion of the bill. It started on page, here we have the penalties, which have not been changed. So at the bottom of page 34, this is the deleting brokered personal information. You may remember that the data broker had to maintain a web page on their website where you could request that it be deleted. The web page should be accessible. All these things were in subsection C. There was also some exemptions, which no longer matter because the authority has been removed from the bill. all the way down to page 39, where you have the consumer rights webpage that the Secretary of State has to provide. So this was also amended because that webpage had mentioned that you must provide a URL to all the deletion web pages. So because they're no longer required to provide a deletion opt-out, deletion, right? That was just reframed as the spreadsheet is still there. So the Secretary of State still must provide that spreadsheet of data broker information that they collect from those data brokers. And then any additional information that they want to give to consumers about their data broker rights. Okay, the seventh instance was an addition of the term consumer in the data broker subchapter. So this was a kind of a later request from the Senate committee to align the consumer definition with the S71 consumer definition. And it affects just that subchapter, does not affect the definition of what a data broker is. It just would affect in their registration information what they deem to be a consumer. So it's not a really impactful change. Now, if you ever were to put the deletion mechanism back in the subchapter, that could make a difference. But for now, this definition of consumer aligns with the S71 definition of consumer. The current definition of consumer in this chapter is an individual residing in the state. That's the current definition of consumer that would have applied otherwise. I'll keep going on. The eighth instance is new material that you all didn't take up. There was a request to add in new members to the Cybersecurity Advisory Council. This was a request from members of the IT committees that they had a bill on the wall that would have done something like this, but couldn't get the bill to move. So it made it to this bill. And the Cybersecurity Advisory Council was created, I think, 5 or 6 years ago to obviously advise the state on various cybersecurity topics. And the bill would add 2 legislators. Currently, there are no legislators on the council. So it would add those 2 chairs of those 2 IT committees, the chair of House Energy and Digital Infrastructure and the chair of Senate Institutions. And then also a member from the judiciary would be added to the council. Any questions about that?
When we have commissions like this, is it normal, is it usual to list the member of the body in that way, or is it done in other places, or is it normally, committee on committees and the speaker?
That's usually what's done.
But this is done in other places.
This was the request, and there's nothing legally wrong about this. It's just not typically the way it's done.
Thank you.
We have a joint fiscal committee.
That has specific people that are assigned to it.
Ex officio is typically, because they're the chair of appropriations or they're the chair of Ways and Means. Yeah. But okay, the ninth section is also the Cybersecurity Council. It is set to sunset in June of 2028. There was a request that it be pushed back to 2033. So that sunset would be extended by 5 years. Okay, the 10th instance is language that you might be familiar with. It's from H650. That's the Ed Tech bill that you all passed out of here. So that bill kind of got stuck on the Senate side. So the Senate Economic Development Committee put it into this bill, but just the registration piece. That bill, as it came out of this committee, had the registration piece. It also had a study from AOE that would review the certification process of ed tech products. So that was stripped out of this language. And it mostly reflects what was in your registration language. There's a couple of changes I'll point out here. So the definition of ed tech product mostly stayed the same, except student-facing software was used. So it would apply to any software. So it could also be teacher, administrator. If it's used for teaching and learning, that part stayed in the definition.
Just re-say again, this applies to the amendment applies to student-facing software,
Other way around.
other way.
Yeah,
It
so,
applies to all of the software.
yes, yeah. But it was also narrowed. So subdivision B is new.
Mhm.
Educational technology product and product does not include hardware or other physical devices or a product that is being used in a school without the knowledge of the provider. So that would allow a provider, if they just don't know that their a website is being used in a random school in Vermont, then they would say, well, we didn't know that. So there was I think a fear that companies would be told to register and they wouldn't know they have to register.
Mhm.
Hardware. Okay, I'm just, like a Chromebook is technically hardware. But the software would be registered, correct? Or
So the iOS, the
iOS would have to be, but the Chromebook itself. would
Right.
not.
the company that makes it, right? So Google in that case, right? Or Alphabet.
So any type of device would basically have to be bricked in order for it not to be registered, correct?
I don't know if I put it that way.
I mean, the way I read this is the physical device. I mean, I'm sitting in front of a Windows 11 PC, but the fact of the matter is, I can wipe the drive and put Linux on it. Or put
But the
nothing on it.
Linux would have to be,
The Linux, that would make, you
that
know,
would be.
If it's being used for teaching and learning purposes, right? I'm not sure if an OS would be used for teaching and learning.
I remember learning a DOS.
so do I.
Yep.
Or this subpart B where it does not include Romanet to a product that is being used in the school without the knowledge of the provider. If the provider is then made aware of it, does this still govern or does everything else kick in and they then have to register?
So if they're told that your product is being used, that would be knowledge. And they would be, if they meet the definition otherwise,
Right.
then they would need to register with the state.
So it's not a carte blanche, get out of jail free.
No, no.
Thank you.
Okay, the definition of filing stayed the same. So this is the same as the franchisor bill that you passed out a few months ago. That, you know, if this business is doing business in Vermont, they should already be registered as a foreign entity. And they would register once a year, file a report. So if filing is any filing with the Secretary of State. The provider definition did not change. It is a person, which includes businesses, that provides an ed tech product that is in use at the school. School means a public or independent school approved in Vermont law.
So if I'm a rogue school and I purchase a bunch of ed tech without notifying, am I misunderstanding that would be something that would not be covered?
If you're a rogue school purchasing ed tech without knowledge of,
Without knowledge of the provider, it means a person that provides an education, oh, never mind. Never mind.
okay, and if they didn't have knowledge it was being used, that would go along with that, that they weren't aware that the school was. It's meant to apply to websites where you don't actually sell the product to a school without knowing. So The rest of the bill and the ed tech language stayed mostly the same, is that when they do that filing, they must supply the name of their provider, a link to their privacy policy, the name of each school in which they have a paid contract, the name and a brief description of each product of the provider, or a URL that provides the same information. That's a little bit different. The "or" was added by the Senate. I think some companies like Alphabet that have multiple products just wanted to submit one link instead of describing each product that they offer. Five, these are both, all these were both in the House passed version. Which products may be used in any school, and an attestation that it meets your privacy laws and federal privacy laws. The 11th instance is just updating the effective dates because you are adding several different sections. So sections 1 and 4, that is the data broker subchapter. Secretary of State wanted more time to update their system to allow for the fields that will be required. And 4 is the ed tech language also. They wanted more time to update their systems to allow for those fields to be added. That'll be January 1. Everything else is July 1 of this year. Finally, the Senate Appropriations Committee stripped out the money that was in the study. So because the budget was already done. If you go down to the as passed version, you may remember you have the study that the Secretary of State's going to look at creating a deletion mechanism that California has already done. And part of this study included a $50,000 subsection C appropriation to hire a consultant. So the study stays in, the appropriation was stripped out. And they would have until still 2028, December 1, 2028 to do the study. And those were the 12 changes the Senate has proposed.
Trying to get my head wrapped around the differences, the data broker bill and the data privacy bill, but last year, but trying to understand, the Senate deleted the deletion provisions in the data broker bill. Trying to understand how that impacts, what practical effect that has in terms of, I know that controllers and processors are different than data brokers, but they might have some overlap, I think.
Every data broker is going to be a controller.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a shaking head.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know which controller would data broker would not be a controller.
I'll just
A data
You know,
broker's
like,
decide,
I-
a data broker's deciding how data is how data is being processed
Yeah.
and the terms of data. So I would consider, I'll say 99% of data brokers controllers. Maybe there's one that's not.
just for purposes of my question, I think there's some overlap at least.
Yes.
And I'm trying to understand, the Senate took out the consumer right to delete. But then over on S71, the consumer has some rights over their
Right.
personal data, especially the sensitive data in terms of opting in and stuff.
Right.
And so I'm trying to understand what the practical effect of the change in the data broker is with, taking out that deletion. Right.
I think the exemptions is a big part of it. So a data broker could be exempt under S71, right? If they meet one of those exemptions, that's in that part of the bill.
Sure. Yeah.
In 211, there were some exemptions, but they were very limited. There was a GLBA exemption. I think you all put that in.
Those were removed, right? Because they were on the deletion.
Right, well, yeah, but as it passed the House, when you passed the deletion authority, there were a handful of Fair Credit Reporting Act. There were
We didn't
some,
have any.
there were some exemptions to deletion in the House.
Oh, yeah, I guess there were a couple, yeah.
I looked at this bill for hours.
Yeah, but not what they did in the Senate though, before they deleted.
Right.
That's
Right. No, but I know the bill pretty well, so happy to answer questions about it at this point. Data, my brain is full of data. Thank you. I'll forget it by next week, but right now,
what I'm trying, I guess I'm getting at is to some extent, does S 71 contain similar protections for consumers that are no longer in H 211?
The 71 contain protections that were removed in 211. Is that kind of the question?
Yeah.
So yeah, the right to delete is in 71. Again, a data broker may be exempt under 71.
Correct.
That would not have been exempt under 211. But the right to opt out, those were not in 211, right? So
Right.
211, well, as it came to the Senate, there was not an authority to opt out for consumers when it comes to data brokers. In 71, there is. So it really depends upon if a data broker is a controller, which I'm going to say they mostly are. And if that's the case, if they're not exempt, then consumers do have those personal data rights that you all went through, the right to access the data, the right to delete their data, the right to opt out of the sale of your data. So there are several things
And the
consumers
need
can
for
do.
express consent for processing and collecting sensitive data.
Right. Right.
Okay, thank you.
Question?
I know you've said it. No, I'm not seeing it on here. Just to confirm, the definition of data broker is the same as it left this chamber.
Correct. Do you want to see it? Just to, okay.
I've been doing my own little, like,
Yeah.
just,
It's not a strike all, which makes it difficult, but it was such a long bill, the strike all was going to be, I think, more confusing.
it's a long bill and it's a long amendment. Oh,
Yeah.
Questions for Rick? What is your pleasure?
I think. So. The ed tech. Obviously, I supported that coming out of here. And. I think that. It's pretty important to get that piece at least over the finish line. It's certainly not. As robust as I think we wanted it, but of course, what we had when we left here wasn't as robust as what we wanted. So I mean, I think that's such an important part that I would move this forward.
are you making a motion to?
I'll make a motion. Well, do we want to talk or?
No, I
We
think-
can do it after you do a motion.
I make a motion to approve, we would report favorably on the Senate proposal of amendment
To H2.
to H 211, because that came directly from me.
I second that motion.
Any further discussion? Thought, all in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? It's carried, so.
I guess we won't call it the delete.
I think ed tech is an important thing that needs to be brought up in next session. And anyone that's left here after the elections, please bring it up.
Yeah, we need to do a lot of tweaking, I think, 71 and this one.
Our children need it.
Anything